Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings and to make recommendations to the council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the city council next month. Agendas can be found at www.topeka.org. Many of tonight's cases involve public hearings. For those cases, the procedures will be as follows. First, the planning department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, if you will, please take roll.
Mr. Beck?
Here.
Mr. Crook?
Here.
Ms. Cuevas Stubblefield? Here. Mr. Gales?
Here.
Mr. Jefferson?
Here.
Mr. Hogg? Ms. Jordan? Here. Mr. Lackey?
Here.
Mr. Woods?
Here.
We have 8 and
Okay, thank you. At this time, I would like to step back for a second and possibly have a rearrangement of the agenda for tonight. I know we've got several people here in the audience tonight for one specific item. With that in mind and potential length of that one, I thought we would rearrange item E1 to put it after item E4 and move items 2, 3, and 4 up to the front and go ahead and get those out of the way and on with the meeting. So I would like to make a motion to make that change. Is there a second?
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will rearrange the agenda and put items E2, 3, and 4 ahead of item 1 and put it at the end. Next item is approval of last month's minutes. Are there any revisions? I know I did have one slight notification on the absent and present list that Mr. Gales was in fact present and not absent. Was Mr. Hall?
Mr. Hall was in attendance.
No, he was not. He's gone on vacation.
He was in attendance there. Mike,
I
wasn't
can't
he?
recall. Are there any other revisions?
He was there with us. Yeah, I think Dennis Hall was in attendance also.
Okay, we may also ask that you review if Dennis Hall was at the meeting or not. We believe that
Okay.
he may have been here, but mistakenly marked as absent.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll have to get on the note taker from last month.
I believe they're listed in both places as absent and present.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome Chris Wagers to our staff to this time. She will take better notes this month.
We hope.
Any other revisions, modifications?
Move to approve.
Second. Move and approve in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That was moves approved with corrections, correct? Okay. Very good. With that, we'll move on to item C, which is communications. Mr. Feyender?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have the brief you on the handouts that you have to make sure everybody's aware of it. You had two things, actually 3 things handed out tonight. 2 for the Walgreens PUD case. You should have a bounded communication from Caw Valley Engineering dated September 16th, and then a bounded exhibit from Henson, Hutton, Mudrick, and Gregson dated September 17th. Those are the 2 additional items. I believe you received both of those electronically. So these aren't necessarily new for the most part. And then you have your agenda for next week as well. I think you should have received.
All right.
That's all.
Thank you. Item D, any declaration of conflicts or ex parte communication? Hearing or seeing none, we'll move onward from there. I guess I would like to take a step back and welcome Mr. Wood to the commission. Glad to have you on board, and thank you for volunteering to take your part in the community. So, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
With that, we'll move right into our public hearing portion. We will start with item E2, and I believe that is Ms. Hansley.
These three cases come from the previous adoption of the Oakland Neighborhood Plan and the Historic North Topeka East Neighborhood Plan. Staff worked with these neighborhoods last year as part of the sort process to identify land uses that were not currently reflected with their zoning coding, and these three cases are to just correct those so that the current land use is reflected by its zoning designation. The first case, Z14-9, is for the Oakland neighborhood. The plan was adopted on March 11, 2014, and in it we recommended rezoning of 6 properties. These properties are located on the east side of the 100 block of Northeast Lime Street, adjacent to the railroad yards over there. The surrounding area was rezoned as part of the 2004 neighborhood plan, but these properties did not make the list for that and therefore are still listed as heavy industrial I-2 zoning. They have always been, before Oakland was even annexed to the city, used for residential purposes. So we requested that the Planning Commission initiate the rezoning of these 6 properties, and staff has met with the neighborhood, contacted the property owners, and held a neighborhood information meeting. At this, we answered any questions from the constituents. It was held in conjunction with the Oakland NIA meeting, so as to reach more of the population. And we were not contacted with any questions or concerns about this. Based on the character and the historic land use, staff is recommending rezoning of these properties to R2 residential single-family dwelling.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing portion of the agenda for this item. Is there anyone here in the audience that wishes to speak for or against this item? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and close public hearing. Any discussion amongst us? Seems pretty straightforward to me. I don't have any.
I would make a motion to approve the staff recommend.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Chris, if you would please call roll.
I will. Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Lackey?
Aye.
Woods?
Aye.
Beck?
Aye.
Crook?
Aye.
Cuevas Stubblefield?
Aye.
Gales?
Aye.
Jefferson?
Aye.
The motion passes with 8 positive votes.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to item E3. Ms. Hanslick.
These next 2 cases are the historic North Topeka East portion of these rezonings. The neighborhood plan was adopted in December 17 of 2013, and in it we recommended rezoning of 2 properties. These were worked through with the neighborhood plan steering committee, and in it they recommended changing the east half of Veterans Park, located at 844 Northeast Quincy, from its current X2 mixed-use zoning to OS1 Open Space District to continue its use as a park and further ensure that it stays as such. That case is the first one as Z1410. This shows an aerial locating it just to the east side of the bridge. We held a neighborhood information meeting that was held both with this and the following case with the Historic North Topeka East NIA meeting, and it's currently owned by the Shawnee County Parks and Rec Department, and they are supportive of this rezoning. And staff is recommending to rezone this as OS1 Open Space District to continue its use as a park.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Got a talkative bunch this evening?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Any opponents at all to this proposal?
No. Throughout the three rezonings, I was not contacted by anybody in opposition, either neighborhood residents or the property owners.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we will open the public hearing portion of this agenda item. If there's anyone that wishes to speak for or against, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion. Is there any other discussion or motions? Again, this seems to fall in line with what the intentions are. Reserving it as a public park is a good step in the right direction.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve.
Second.
We have a move and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, Ms. Wagers, please call roll.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Crook?
Aye.
Ms. Cuevas Stubblefield?
Aye.
Mr. Jefferson?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Lackey?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item E4, excuse me. Ms. Henslick.
This is the second rezoning initiated by the Planning Commission to be part of the implementation of the historic North Topeka East Neighborhood Plan. This property looks at an unaddressed parcel in the 800 block of Northeast Monroe. When the area was rezoned as part of the 1999 rezoning of the downzoning of this area, this property was not rezoned as the owners wished to remain it as R4 Mobile Home District to keep it for their use as such. The current property owners are in favor of it being rezoned so that it's compliant with the X2 zoning all around it, so that they would have the same property uses as they currently enjoy across the alleyway to the east on their existing parcel. We held a neighborhood information meeting, again, to discuss this at the NIA meeting, and received no commentary or questions about it. Staff is recommending to rezone this as X2 and so that it's in fitting with the surrounding area.
Thank you again. Any questions for staff?
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
How did that get missed the first time around when everything around it's the other way?
Looking at the case file on that property, it was rezoned to R4 a few years prior to the downzoning of the area. It would be my guess that the property owners wanted to continue its use as such since they'd just gone through the process. At that point, they had owned adjacent property and were wanting to move a mobile home in for their daughter to be adjacent to them. It was never done so, and so has always remained vacant and unaddressed.
And since then, the property is sold and the new owner, okay.
Correct. I've spoken with the owner twice regarding what the proposal was and what the current property zoning allows, and he had been under the impression that it would allow the same uses as X2.
Any other questions? Okay, we will open the public hearing portion of this agenda item. If there's anyone here to speak for or against this item, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, I will again close the public hearing portion of the meeting, and we will have discussion amongst the commission.
I move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a move and a second. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Wagers, please call roll.
Mr. Jefferson?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Lackey?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Crook?
Aye.
Ms. Cuevas Stubblefield? Mr. Gales?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay. With that, we are ready to move back to item E1, which is the PUD for 29th and Gage. Do want to make sure we know, for those coming to speak for the public hearing portion, this is a continuance of the public hearing from a month or two ago. Is that correct?
This is, Mr. Chair, this is actually a brand-new case.
This is a brand-new case?
Yes.
Okay, so it is no continuance just strike that from your memory. Brand-new case with a new filing, so you're correct. I'll just reserve my comments for later. With that, we'll start with staff and have it presented. Ms. Driver?
Thank you, Chairman. This is E1. It's PUD 14-3. As mentioned, it revises a previous application, which was PUD 14-2, that was continued by the Planning Commission in June. That was withdrawn by the applicant and replaced by this case. The proposal is for a zone change from R1 single-family dwelling district to PUD planned unit development for C2 commercial uses. The area comprises 13 properties, all at the northwest corner of 29th and Gage Boulevard. The proposal is for a new 14,820 square foot Walgreens, the drive-through pharmacy that would be open 24 hours. Some of the significant changes from the initial PUD are the addition of 2 single-family properties, the westernmost one along 29th Street, and then the northernmost one along Gage. They're approximately 303 foot from the intersection on 29th and 338 feet from the intersection along Gage. They align with the opposing driveways across the street, restricting left turns onto southwest Gage by the provision of a median, creating a small pocket park within the green area that's between the fence and 28th Terrace, which is a residential street. This allows the fence to be placed further back from the street, keeping it outside the front yards of adjacent properties. The addition of a bus stop, including a bus pull-out lane along southwest 29th Street, and then splitting the original detention pond that was at the northern boundary into 2 separate ponds. That's with the intent to retain some of the older growth trees along the northern boundary. The current Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2025 principles and policies recommend that commercial uses such as this proposal be located at a nodal pattern at your arterial intersection. Currently, there is commercial development at 3 of the 4 corners of the intersection, so rezoning the subject property for commercial completes that node. In addition, the Planning Department's proposed future land use map and land use and growth management plan establishes additional nodal principles for both the intensity and the type of your commercial uses. Some of those factors involved were functional street classifications, average daily traffic, and a number of neighborhoods that are served. That update recommends this intersection be established as a community commercial node. Those community commercial uses tend to draw traffic from the surrounding community, serving multiple neighborhoods across the city. They're typically have shown to carry between 30,000 and 40,000 average daily traffic at or near the intersection. One of the major revisions on this PUD that addresses a key Planning Commission concern is the provision of a green space that's proposed as the pocket park along the north property line. This would keep the fence outside the setbacks of adjoining residential properties. The revised traffic impact study, or TIS, was submitted by the applicant's engineer addressing the new development area. That TIS does point out that the additional land fronting along 29th and Gage allows the property to meet 2 of the Planning Commission's key traffic concerns, which was the location of the project's driveways. That TIS was approved by the city's traffic engineering consultant. The intersection itself is already operating at a level of service D, which is considered acceptable in the peak hour. The level of service at the intersection is shown to not be reduced by this particular development's traffic. Driveways on Gage are greater than 300 foot from the intersection. They align with the driveways across the street, which is consistent with the city's design criteria. Plan restricts all left turns after the development onto Gage. In addition, the project will dedicate right-of-way that's necessary for future intersection improvements. The applicant conducted a neighborhood information meeting on August 28th. That report is in your packet, along with some additional supplementary information. Planning staff recommends approval. City staff is here to answer your questions. The applicant's representative are here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Driver. Any questions for staff initially? I do want to thank you, Ms. Driver, for notifying us that this information, additional information, was available on the website, that we could get to it prior to tonight's meeting. Thank you. Gives us a little extra time to prepare. Any other questions for staff or comments before we open up the public hearing? Hearing none, I think we will go forward and open the public hearing. We have heard this item prior in a different case, but similar circumstances. So we have heard several of the concerns from the neighbors and also from the applicant and their representatives. We would like to try and keep it to some new information if possible. I know there may be some of you that weren't here at last meeting, and you're welcome to speak. We will not stop you from doing so. We would like you to make every effort that you can to present new information to us so that we're not just listening to what we'd heard the previous time. With that, we would like to hear from the applicant to start.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Wittenberg. I'm president of Batiste Development Company, and we are the applicant, along with the 13 homeowners who signed to rezone these residential properties to PUD C2. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, if we can bring that up.
It's on the desktop.
Okay. I know listening to Ms. Driver talk, it made me tired just thinking of everything that's gone into it.
It's on the desktop.
Is that it? All right, so all of you were here except for Mr. Wood last time, and I will try to keep it to new information. There it is, got it. With me tonight is Matt Werner, my partner in Batiste Development Company. He's the architect for this project. Also with us is David Wood. David is the traffic engineer who prepared the traffic study for us. And Leon Osborne, who is the president or chairman of Caw Valley Engineering. Both these gentlemen from Caw Valley Engineering have done a lot of work with us on Walgreens projects in the past. Most comments I will make tonight will try to be on a comparative basis, so it is new information. And I apologize, Mr. Wood, some of this will be familiar to others, not you. The outline I'll try to stick to is Walgreens and its role in the community. What is the impact on the host neighborhood? And then what are the benefits of the new rezoning, both traffic and from a design standpoint? Walgreens in Topeka is an important part, 8 stores, 320 Topekans work there. Why do they need the new store? It's because this is one of only 2 24-hour stores in our community. The existing store at 18,000 square feet is too large compared to the 14.8 they need. Does not have a drive-through. And this new location is an improved location over where they are currently because it's homebound and homebound, if that makes sense. Both Gage in this area and 29th Street are on the homebound side for the northwest corner. And that should reduce auto accidents. Most of the turning motion will be right turns on entrance and exit from the new Walgreens. So that shows you, as the city did, or as the planning staff did, is currently R1, and we'll be moving to make this a PUD C2 property. What's the impact on the host neighborhood? Westview Heights was developed in 1956 as 89 homes, 900 to 1,400 square foot slab on grades. This community has been under attack, as Some of the floodplain area has been expanded here. But of biggest concern is declining home values in this area and what's causing that. There is an increasing crime rate. There is concern that introducing commercial property into this area could impact in a negative manner the home values in this area. There's also a significant growth in rental properties in this neighborhood, and the traffic volumes on these two arterials long ago surpassed safe residential levels. This is a picture of declining property values in the area. You see 3 big areas or 3 years of significant decline in property values, and only 1 year where there was an increased value on the homes that are right here on this corner. So we start talking about what's causing it. Is it the crime rate? We went over this last time. I won't go over that in great detail. 19 calls in the first 3 months of this year with prostitution, battery, narcotics, fighting, dog fighting. If it's not the crime rate, is it possibly introduction of commercial property into the neighborhood? There's already a Walgreens in this neighborhood. All 3 of the corners, other than this one, are already commercial. So to lobby that commercial uses in this area are impacting the value of homes is somewhat of a lost argument. If you compare that to 37th and Wanamaker, where there is another Walgreens immediately adjacent to homes in the area, you can see that they only experienced 1 year of declining property values. It was really a significant declining year, but in all the other years, they've either been flat or increasing, and in the last year, they did increase. Compares favorably to what's been going on at this corner. We did have a study done by a noted PhD in the area of land economics, and he did a study of what's going on here. He started his career at Kansas State, so he's very familiar with Topeka market, lived here for a while. And he's now the head of land economics for, was at University of Utah and is moving to Arizona. But after doing research on available materials and research data out there, his point is that this project, with the input of planning staff and what's going on, should result in an increased value of residential properties that are, and even those that are nearest to the site. So that's on the basis of current research. The other question is, could it be, if it's not crime, if it's not the introduction of residential properties, commercial properties, could it be the rental markets growing in this area? All the red homes here are rental properties. Currently, 32% of this neighborhood is rental. That's higher than what you'd like to see it at. We again went to research data on what is the impact of rental homes. In an article written by Wang, Grissom, Spellman, and Webb, PhDs from the various universities shown here, their study of the impact of rental properties on the value of single-family residences pointed to the fact that there is an inverse relationship between the growth of rental properties and the fair market value of homes in the area. The next study is a study that was done by Wendy Usry, and it's called The Rental Next Door, Impact of Rental Proximity on Home Values. And she finds that properties are adversely affected on home values whenever those homes, rental homes, are within a quarter mile of the subject home. This entire 89 home subdivision is not a quarter mile long. So as you look at residential ownership or rental ownership in this area, eclipsing a full third of all the properties in this area, it is going to negatively impact it in a way that we can clearly point to. But the research doesn't point to commercial or crime as empirically as this research does. What are the things to improve the neighborhood? This project takes the rental properties down to 23% instead of 32%. We're below a quarter of the homes now that are rentals. The homes that have sold since the Walgreens project was announced have sold fast, and they've sold to homeowners. So the argument that Walgreens coming into this neighborhood would deter people from coming here is not accurate. People have been buying in this area as a promise and a commitment to the idea that the negative home values on this corner, the crime that exists, and the volume of rental properties is going to go away with the introduction of a good neighborhood retailer on the corner. And then the last thing is the owners, of course, will have to assume responsibility and start to communicate with the rental property owners, each other, and with the community at large. Benefits of the new rezoning application. We started this project as 7 properties. We went to 11 properties. That was what you heard on June 16th. And now we're at 13 properties. So, you know, if we can wait 60 more days, we'll get it up to 20. We just got to work a little harder at it. But I think we're through at 13. This is the 11-home site plan. And here is the 13-home site plan, and disregard the stars. Those are all the positives that we're going to go over momentarily. You're going to see from this point on a comparison of those two plans. The traffic. Thank you very much to this group. Thank you to the people who played a role back on the initial proposal. There were some really good ideas. It caused us to go back and rethink what we were doing and add 2 more properties to this overall rezoning. But what we've come up with is an adoption of the ideas that came forward. There are now 7 points of access on 29th and Gage that have been eliminated. 9 homes on 29th and Gage, only 2 entrances going back. It's a good thing. Both entrances now from the intersection are greater than 300 feet. This is that corner, and you can see that the Gage intersection for us is 339 feet. The intersection on 29th is 304 feet. And you compare that to the distances on the remaining 3 corners, and you can tell that this will be the best suited corner of all. We're going to have the greatest distances from the intersection in terms of ingress and egress. Both entrances align with the opposing drives, and 29th and Gage Boulevard entrance locations eliminate opposing left turn movements associated with offset driveways. If you'll look right here, in the old plan, the offset for the other street was over in this area, and we didn't line up quite with the center to the south, Marketplace Shopping Center. In the new plan, by adding these parcels, that one and this one, we shifted to the west on 29th Street and line up perfectly with the entrance to Marketplace Shopping Center, and we line up immediately across the street from the entrance to on the other side of Gage Boulevard. It does away with conflicting left turns in these chicken lanes here and here. And we also, I think that's the next slide. The other thing we did is that we moved Gage from a full access. In the last application, you'll see that this was a full access, full movement. And what we came back with here was deliberate, even though the traffic study said you can go full motion here, we felt it was safer to come with 3/4 and restrict those left turn movements and conflicting patterns. We also went to the maximum right turn angle so that we would preclude people from making that quick jump back around to a left turn. Last thing, we added the bus stop down here at the bottom. You can see it wasn't appearing here, but the bus stop does appear in this depiction. We're allowing for a lane, we're pouring the concrete, we're doing all the work necessary so that buses can get out of the flow of traffic and improve the flow on 29th Street. So there were 5 issues raised, 5 addressed. We think that the postponing it and coming back with new ideas was the right thing to do. We didn't believe that 60 days ago, but this is a significantly better plan. Neighborhood improvements, again, there were some ideas that came out of this group that were significantly important. Some of those that have not changed that are the same from last time. We're still doing screening fencing, solid evergreens, exterior lighting being shielded. The setback from this corner and the sideline is going to move from 30 feet currently to 150 feet. That's a significant improvement in sightline for right turns off of Gage on the 29th. All right-of-way dedications have already been granted. So in the future, if you want to take this intersection to add lanes, if you want to do whatever you want to do, we are the only corner that has already made that granting. You would have to go and make that appeal of other corners. We're already there. We increased the number of fire hydrants, and delivery time in the old study was 5 a.m. to 8 p.m., and we went back to Walgreens, and they said, no, we don't take deliveries at 5 a.m., even though it's a 24-hour store. 7 a.m. is plenty adequate. Most people are starting to move at 7 a.m. and it shouldn't be a problem. The new design, here are the new ideas that we brought out of this group last time. We added the pocket park. You can see this area reflects the fence that was here last time and the tree line, and it was right up on the sidewalk. In the new plan, we pulled the fence back so that it runs in concert with the fence setback for the adjacent neighbors here and here. It's a 40 to 30 foot setback area that will be greenscaped, irrigated, and maintained. And you know, we'd certainly like to donate that to the city, but I think that we'll probably wind up with that thing. So that's the first thing we're going to have is a backyard buffer improvement and a nice amenity for the neighborhood. We increased side yard green space. If you look over here in the old one, without the addition of this other parcel, we were pretty close on this property. But by adding the Mitchell's property, you get a really nice expanded green space here. I think the people who own this home are here tonight, and they do have quite a few dogs, and they were concerned. They said, will our dogs be a problem for what's going on there? Will it be upset? I think with the fence, with the increased green space, we should have a really nice side yard for them. Same thing occurs here, a little more green space. We saved more of the old growth trees by splitting the detention pond. You can see we had a single one before, most trees were gone. By adding this, we're able to put part of the pond here and here, picked up all these old mature trees. And so as we talk about splitting the detention areas, they're not really ponds, detention basins. That's what we'll be talking about is the two. Increased green space on Gage, used to look like this. We're now able to pick up all this green space in here. We added designated crosswalk for the bus stop right here, so it comes right out of this. That idea came out of here last time as well. And so that people don't have to come down and come across to the storefront. They come right into the storefront here. So in summary, Walgreens in Topeka is an excellent corporate citizen, an example of what you would look for in neighborhood retail for this area. The impact to the host neighborhood, there are many issues that make up the current condition, but the addition of Walgreens will only serve to improve the area in our opinion. The benefits of the new rezoning application, the planning department staff report, including the traffic engineer, recommend approval. Traffic, all the issues that were raised in the first study have been addressed. I'm sure you're going to hear, and you saw paperwork before, that in the absence of having anything else to talk to, the argument's going to move to the functionality of the intersection. The functionality of the intersection is not something to be borne by the developer. That is a city issue. Our issue is to deal with, did we follow the standards and appropriately design this in a manner that is safe for traffic? And the traffic study approved by our engineer, the city's engineer, and the other people involved says that it is, in fact, by going to 3/4 on Gage, we went above and beyond the call of duty. Neighborhood improvements, all the ideas for improvement have been adopted. Parks, trees, setback, green space, and crosswalks have all been improved, and this is as pretty a project as you're going to find, and a wonderful investment back into a neighborhood that needs a shot in the arm. And we'd sure like to be a part of seeing this intersection improved.
All right, any questions for Mr. Wittenberg?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. Mr. Whitberg, you may not answer, but one of your engineers might.
If you're going to talk about traffic, I'm going to get him up here now.
It's an easy one.
Oh, okay.
Since you moved the entrance on Gage farther north, how is the sightline distance down Gage there? Because there's a home left on the corner, and then there's a curve and a bridge on down there.
Good evening, David Wood, Call Valley Engineering, 14700 West, 114th Terrace, Lenexa, Kansas, 66215. Get the particulars out of the way. Regarding the houses to the north, specifically when we're dealing with the driveway for Walgreens, we look specifically at the site distance at that particular driveway. I know up at 28th Street, it's about 300 feet away. We were kind of mid-block between 29th Street and 28th Street. I did see There was an email included in some of the correspondence, I think, that was issued to the commission that discussed potential for a site distance issue up further by a creek. I think it's around the curve, but the actual driveway itself for the Walgreens has substantial site distance.
Okay,
I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but.
And to that effect, I was wondering what prompted, and maybe that answers it, but what prompted the decision to restrict the left turn onto Gage? What did it have to do with that site distance with the bridge?
Actually, from my professional opinion, I probably would have gone ahead and gone with full access. The primary concern I had with the initial proposal was the driveway itself was not aligned with any of the driveways across the street. When the developer went ahead and aligned those driveways, the concerns with offsetting left turns and the conflict points that arise from that kind of condition went away. Now, they're looking at doing three-quarter access. It will restrict the left turn movement. It may add a safety benefit there, but there will be some maintenance issues and other things they'll have to deal with.
You don't see any issues with the left-hand turn on the 29th, though?
No, I don't. I would recommend it.
Mr. Wood, I just have a quick question just to get your comment. The driveways that are remaining along Gage as well as along 29th Street, their proximity to the ingress egress of the site, does that present any issues with you?
I'm less concerned than I was with the initial application. The initial application had shown a driveway on Gage Boulevard that basically just was right there connected to the driveway on Gage. Now they're at a greater distance. I can't speak exactly what that distance is, but I think it's closer to 40 or 50 feet. Again, with the proximity of residential driveways along that street, the lots are fairly narrow to begin with. I think that's a condition they'll be accustomed to.
Just with increased traffic is what I'm thinking. More vehicles turning out, possibly conflicting with them exiting their
Possibly,
properties.
yes.
That's where I was coming from.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Since we're on the traffic, is there any other questions on the traffic-related items for Mr. Wood?
Nope.
See none at this time, but we may have you back up here. Any other questions for the applicant?
I was curious what the base flood elevation is approximately back behind. I know that there is a little bit of floodplain somewhere near the northwest part of this property. I was just curious what the BFE was.
I knew you were going to ask a question I couldn't answer.
Listed on here?
You have it.
If I didn't ask a floodplain question, these guys wouldn't know what to do.
Hey, it makes me feel good. We're paying big money to these guys, so, let's make them earn. I do know that it only comes into, are you familiar with the little semicircular drive right there? It's only in that drive. It doesn't get above the curb. So as we do this project and we fill it, we're actually going to be taking this out of, raising it above that significantly. One of the questions came up in a call today with Walgreens, and they said, do you want to file get a new determination letter? And so one of the things we might do is just reshoot that floor after we hit finished elevation and go for another determination letter. But it's certainly not required. It would just be one of the things they would be doing to put some of these issues aside. 925. And what is finished floor scheduled to be? 925 and 932.8 on finished floor, so a separation of, how many feet is that? I'm not doing math. 7+ feet.
Think you'll clear it.
All right. Yes, before Mr. Jefferson asks it on the floodplain issue, I see you are filling into the floodplain. I'm sure that's been addressed with permitting and everything that is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just should definitely introduce myself more properly also so everyone knows. I'm actually Woods plural for everybody's benefit. Just so later you won't feel awkward if you meet me and I introduce myself as Patrick Woods. Quick question on that. You had a slide that discussed the crime issue and actually had a report from the police department, crime classification, and you mentioned a couple of calls that had come in for particularly heinous crimes, primarily prostitution and drugs. I remember seeing that in the red on your slide. Curious, just so I know that I'm reading this correctly, I was looking at, Exhibit B, and it's got a pie chart there of all the different crimes. And I didn't, in case I'm overlooking it, I didn't see prostitution. I wanted to make sure I was looking at the exact same.
That's a very good question. In terms of the report here, this was what we got from the police department. I, like you, do not see the prostitution on here unless it's under other criminal
Yeah,
activities.
it could be. I just didn't know.
Which is the highest number on the whole pie
Yeah.
chart. And we didn't get from them, these are just the 11 homes we were buying.
Oh,
And so, not the bigger pie. The bigger pie is within a half mile of the intersection. But as you go to the next page,
I believe this.
the 19 calls in the yellow on the lower left-hand side,
Oh, there, okay.
there's a little chart.
Yeah.
That's just from the 11 homes that we're buying for the first quarter. There were 19 police calls just on those 11 homes. So the homes that we're taking out are the highest
Yeah.
call
I
rates in the
understand.
neighborhood.
Very good.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Hearing none, I think we will move on with the public hearing portion, but we'll stay close.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
This time, we will ask anyone for or against to please come forward. And again, we do have discretion to extend your 4 minutes if need be. We'll do that on a case-by-case basis.
Very well, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. My name is John Hutton. I am a lawyer here in town. I represent Marketplace Shopping Center, LP, which is the landowner immediately to the south of, on the southwest corner of 29th and Gage. Also, I'd like to introduce some people that are in attendance with me. Both Mark Craig and Dan Craig are here. They are the principals of the limited partnership that I mentioned. Also, via Skype from Shanghai, China, is Chris Huffman, who addressed this body back on June 16th, I believe, was the last time we had a meeting on the 11-lot project. And he will be available to answer any and all questions and to provide testimony, because he can hear you guys and see you guys just as well as if he were here. As I said, the last time we discussed this project was June 16, 2014, and as the chair has identified, most of the issues are the same because for all intents and purposes, it is the same project except 2 lots have been added on the north side and on the west side. And those properties belong to Mr. and Mrs. Kinsey and Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, who, if you recall, were vociferously against this project in the June 16th meeting. Unfortunately, this project still does not pass muster under the Golden versus City of Overland Park test set forth by the Kansas Supreme Court. And I did reference that in my June 13th, 2014 correspondence, and I went into some significant detail with regard to the what we call the golden factors. Rather than bore you with all of those, I'm going to ask that, well, first of all, I'm going to direct you to that letter, which is an attachment to my September 17th, 2014 letter, which I'll talk about later. in which I believe is part of your packet this evening. And of course, I'd like for my September 17th, 2014 letter to be made a part of the record. I assume that it already is, but I'd like my request to be on the record as it is now. You know, there's been a lot of talk about about the neighborhood. And it seems to me that the applicant has tried to term this project and set the cause for this project as an urban renewal project. Hey, there's a lot of drugs going on, there's a lot of bad things going on, there's a lot of crime going on in this neighborhood, so by golly, we can fix it with a Walgreens. Well, unfortunately, I don't think that simply putting a Walgreens into this location is going to change things to the extent that there are things to change. I am also concerned, and my client is also concerned, about the constant drumbeat that that this is a high crime neighborhood. What we have identified, or what the applicant has identified, is a pie chart that lists crimes. He mentions 19 calls were in these 11 houses in a particular period of time, and calls that a study. What that is raw data from the City of Topeka Police Department. And Mr. Chairman, it looks to me like I've got 57 seconds left. I would ask that I be granted additional time so that I can at least match that of the applicant.
I think an additional 4 minutes would be applicable. Agreed? Agreed? That seem
I might
fair?
ask for more, but we can start there.
Okay, we'll go through the 4.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have there is not a crime study. It is a pie chart that shows crime statistics for a half-mile radius, which is basically a quarter section all the way around this intersection, and we're going to say on the basis of that it's a high-crime neighborhood. I don't know that pie chart, if you were to say that it came from 29th and Fairlawn or 21st and Gage or any other major thoroughfare in the city of Topeka, that it's going to look any different. So let's not kid ourselves. This isn't about crime. This isn't about solving urban problems in the city of Topeka. It's about developing a Walgreens. And just so we understand that, we can move forward. Unfortunately, the present application does nothing as it relates to trying to solve any of the issues that it talks about. Basically, what we have here is a situation where we are going from, we have an R1 use, and what the applicant suggests is that we go to a C2 use. There are 12 zoning classifications in between R1 and C2. That's a lot. In between there, you've got office and institutional. You've got various different multifamily types of uses. And my question is, why do we have to go from R1 to this very intensive usage of being C2? And why do we have to impose that on all the neighbors within this block? And by the way, this area has been an R1 residential neighborhood for over 50 years. This isn't something that just sprang up. All of these people that surround this area bought these houses with an understanding that it was a residential neighborhood, not that it was a C2 neighborhood. And if you look at other convenience stores, well, strike that. I'm not sure that Walgreens is a convenience store, but if you look at other similarly situated stores, such as Walgreens, you're going to find they're not plopped down right in the middle of residential neighborhoods. You might find that you're going to have office and institutional, or you might find that you're going to have multifamily, something that's a little bit less intensive right next to residential neighborhoods. But very rarely, I think, are you going to find C2. Okay? You're hitting it pretty hard with C2 if you're going to put it right next to an R1. That's just the way it works. And frankly, it is this body's duty to make sure that those people who purchase their property on the basis of it being R1 and on the basis of the neighbors being R1, that they have their day in court, so to speak. Okay? They don't necessarily have the same resources that the applicant has, and you know, they need this body to protect their rights. That's what zoning's all about. I don't have to tell you that, but sometimes it bears reminding. What zoning is about is win-win solutions. Like I said, this commission's role is to protect the quality of life for landowners who are not lucky enough to be part of this deal. who are not lucky enough to have Mr. Wittenberg come up and buy their property from them. Also need to keep in mind that when I talk about win-win solutions, that we need to consider that spot zoning is not a win-win solution, and let's make no mistake about it, that's what we have here. This is a high-intensive use in a low-intensive area, and I've already gone over that. Unfortunately, approving this planned unit development creates clear losers. No new jobs are created. A large commercial space will be made vacant, and that's the Walgreens in my client's building on the other side of the road. A whole neighborhood will pay the price for this overzoning, so to speak. And that's what this body needs to take into consideration. Again, it looks like I've got a few seconds. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for some additional time.
Additional 4 minutes.
Mr. Chair, could I intervene at this point? How long did Mr. Wittenberg speak? I'm sorry.
Who's that directed at?
Bill or Chris, do you know about how long Mr. Wittenberg?
15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay, well.
Okay, let's go up to that.
Mr. Hutton should have the same amount of time.
Are we gonna give each opponent 15 minutes to speak then?
Well,
At our discretion.
it'll be discretionary, but I do think.
I think a
that
majority
Mr.
may
Hutton
not
should
need that
have the 15 minutes, which I suppose is what, another 10 minutes?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll try to be brief. I know that people have other things to do these evenings. I'd like to also talk about the traffic situation. And you're going to see, and you're going to have the opportunity to talk to Chris Huffman tonight about the traffic situation. And hopefully you've all had a chance to review the materials that he's placed in your packet that have to do, that study with a very, who carefully studied the traffic at this intersection without a jaundiced eye one way or the other, I think you'll find. Another thing that was interesting as it relates to the developer's comment was that Mr. Huffman speaks to the viability of 29th and Gage, the streets themselves, in the present scheme, under the status quo. And what Mr. Huffman says, and I think you'll see this, is that basically 29th and Gage is dysfunctional as we sit here today. And so his answer to that is, well, 29th and Gage is dysfunctional. That's the city's problem. It's not our problem as a developer. Well, let me ask you a question. If this body was considering a new planned unit development, say in the 3-mile radius around the city, or an area of the city that was on the edge and had not been developed for many, many years, would this body take into consideration services? Would this body consider whether or not there was water, whether or not there was sewer, whether or not there were adequate streets? Would this body allow a planned unit development to be built at the end of a dirt road? I don't think so. This body, part of what this body and what the city council are charged with is to make sure that the infrastructure that's in place, whoever's responsible for it, and I think we can agree it's the city, it's their road. How that's financed, how any changes are financed, that's a different story. But I think we can all agree that that's necessary and appropriate for this body to consider. Because you can't consider zoning unless you consider services. And what I'm trying to say, and what Mr. Huffman's trying to say, is that the services in place right now are not adequate, and that what you're going to be doing if this PUD is approved is you're going to be throwing more traffic on top of an already inadequate superstructure, or infrastructure, rather. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the Kinsey and the Mitchell properties. I think you'll find from the materials that I've submitted that there is presently litigation going on between my client and the Kinseys and the Mitchells. I bring this up not because I want to litigate that case in this body, but I think it's fair for this body to know that that litigation is going on. Because what happened was you've got a situation where there was a right of first refusal purchased from both of those families, and somehow they ended up selling the property, or not selling, but entering into a contract with Bettis Development with regard to their lots. And you saw those lots in the various maps that you've seen this evening. And our position is that that is contrary to the right of first refusal agreement that was entered into. And so what we're asking for is specific performance from the district court to ask them or to order them to perform under their contract with us. Not asking to get rich from them, not asking for money from them. We're asking simply that they perform under their contract. Now, how the court's going to decide that, I can't tell you, and I'm not going to pretend to. But I can tell you that there is a possibility that those two lots aren't even going to be in the project. If the court finds our way, then they aren't going to be in the project. And I certainly would never try to say what the court will or will not do, but I think it's fair for this body to understand what's at stake and understand that the litigation exists. Do with that as you will, but at least you are aware of it. Finally, I'd like to wrap up, and I'd also like to finally get to Mr. Huffman, because I think he's got some very, very good information from you. I'd like you to consider this body's role in zoning in the city of Topeka, because it's a little bit different than other communities. As you're aware, City Council determined back in April, I believe it was, that they were not going to have public hearings as it relates to these types of zoning matters. That's different than a lot of other jurisdictions in the state of Kansas. A lot of other governing bodies allow a public hearing before them, even after the Planning Commission has held a public hearing. So what I'm saying is, you guys are the last shop for the public hearing. Neither the applicant or us are going to have an opportunity to present these arguments to the City Council as a whole. They'll look at your recommendation, whatever it is, and they'll make whatever decisions they're going to make. But I think it's very important, and I'm not saying you guys don't know this, but I want to remind you of it, because you're in a little bit rarefied air as it relates, or as compared to other planning commissions in the state of Kansas. I'm not going to say that there aren't similarly situated, municipalities somewhere in the state, but most of the ones I've seen, the governing body holds a hearing. So bearing that in mind, please consider this carefully. This is a big deal. It's a big deal for the city of Topeka because of the traffic issues that are present. It's a very big deal to the people that live or would be forced to live right next to this development. This is important, and this is a weighty matter. And my client, I know everybody in the room very much appreciates your time and your due consideration. I'll answer any questions. If you don't have any for me, we'll get Mr. Huffman up here.
Any questions for Mr. Hutton at this time?
Yeah. Obviously, just got the petition tonight, wasn't aware that this was going on, but if you don't mind, I have just a couple questions on that. How exactly would allowing the zoning change from residential to PUD, would that keep you from exercising your right of first refusal if the court decides to side with you? I mean, or could you end up buying the properties and?
Well, if things go as Mr. Wittenberg and as bad as planned, they'll get some sort of a recommendation from this body. It'll go to the city council, and then the city council will make a decision one way or the other. If they decide that the PUD goes through and that the zoning change goes through, then they can move forward with bulldozing the Kinsey's house and the Mitchell's house, basically taking all of their beneficial interest out of the property and degrading the property that we hoped to purchase.
But at this time, the property has not been sold, correct? That's contingent upon
The deal.
the zoning change.
Right.
Okay. Was there an answer filed to the petition?
Not as of yet. I believe they obtained a 14-day extension to do that.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about that. And off that topic, how much time is left on the lease that Walgreens currently has in Marketplace right now? Do you know?
Yes, I do. It will terminate at the end of June 2017, so well over 2 years.
Okay.
And by the way, Mr. Wittenberg indicated that it'll take them 150 days to build the project. So it's certainly not an emergency on their part. So we're looking well over 2.5 years.
That's all I had.
Any other
Okay.
questions for Mr. Hutton at this moment before we get to Mr. Huffman on?
Okay, well, we'll bring,
He looks noticeably different than last time.
he's a little smaller.
Too deep.
Chris? You can see us? Can you see the planning commission?
Well enough.
How's that?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Commissioners, good morning from the other side of the world. Since I last spoke with you in June, there have been a flurry of activities that I won't waste your time recapping here. In summary, a revised traffic impact study dated August 1 was provided to me, and I was asked to review it. I have done so. Mr. Wood and his colleague met with me in my office on September 15th. There are a fair number of issues upon which Mr. Wood and I do agree. There are a fair number of issues upon which we do not agree. The most recent correspondence I had with Mr. Hutton conveyed my findings as to the capacity analysis of the intersection that I conducted, and it illustrates some significant departures between what I believe is going on out there and what the Kaw Valley engineering study seems to indicate is going on out there. There are three principal reasons for that, in my opinion. One, despite taking local trip generation counts in Topeka for a Walgreens, Kaw Valley elected to use the ITE trip generation average rates again. Their counts that they took at 10th and Topeka were within the range of the ITE data, and they felt that that validated the ITE averages. In consulting with a colleague of mine who has done traffic impact study work for 3 decades, he and I are both of the opinion that that is not the appropriate way to address that. The purpose of doing a local trip generation count is to utilize the local data if it is valid. The purpose of the ITE trip generation ranges is to validate the local count, not the other way around. So Kaw Valley's traffic study count, or traffic trip generation count, is higher than the average. The one that I took at 21st and Fairlawn is higher than the average. Either way, the number utilized in the study is an underestimation of site-generated traffic. The second point is that Mr. Hutton clarified for me that they counted departure volumes in each of the approaches of the intersection. Mr. Wood and I are in agreement that that is necessary for understanding the proportion of turn volumes versus through volumes. However, if you will take a look at Highway Capacity Manual 2010, Chapter 18, it is very clear on this point in that counting vehicles in that way underestimates demand at a congested approach. And that is one thing that the Highway Capacity Manual is very explicit on. So the volumes utilized in the Kaw Valley study for the vehicle demand, for the demand flow rates at 29th and Gage, are underestimations of the actual demand. The third major point is that Mr. Wood feels strongly in consulting with city staff that the current cycle length is too long. I do not doubt that the cycle lengths that are actually present out there are long. However, I would caution this commission against assuming that simply reducing a cycle length for a signal will result in improved capacity of this intersection. It will not. Reducing cycle length times is a mathematical trick by which an
I think he froze on us.
capacity of the intersection. This is important for the following reason. At a 120-second cycle length, as Caw Valley's own study based upon underestimated demand indicates, you will have cycle failure at the approaches. That means that particularly if you are on 29th Street trying to go eastbound or westbound, or on Gage trying to make a left-hand turn from southbound to eastbound, you will probably have to sit through more than one red light to clear through that signal. That's what a shorter cycle length, absent other geometric improvements, will do for you.
Okay,
An
Mr.
improved
Huffman, just,
level of service by changing cycle lengths does not improve capacity, and I absolutely do not recommend that this commission rely upon that. In order for this intersection to be made ready for additional commercial demand and additional turning demand within the functional area, I've made 3 recommendations, one of the most important of which is dedicated right turn lanes on each of the 4 approaches. That will be a significant improvement and a significant capacity enhancement.
now we have a moment. Do we wish to?
The safety issues that I outlined is extension of non-traversable median for approximately 1,000 feet on all
hey.
approaches.
Hold it.
Hey, Chris, hold up a second. The chairman wants to ask you a question.
Well, first off, we've extended our time to the limit. Do we wish to continue extension?
You might inquire how much longer.
Mr. Huffman, how much more do you have to present? Do you think 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
I can conclude now if time's up.
Okay, 30 seconds. Thank you.
In my opinion, the 29th and Gage intersection just isn't ready yet for additional commercial demand.
Yeah, I got
If there are any questions or concerns I can address, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, Mr. Lackey has a question?
I have a question, Mr. Huffman. Exactly what percentage of traffic does this development add to each leg of that intersection?
That I do not know, sir.
Well, it's
Unless we have a better handle on what the actual demand flow rates are at the intersection, there's no way to answer that.
well, with traffic volumes in the range of somewhere between 15 and 21,000, which is, I think, encompasses both of your guesses on both sides of the issue, you'd have to have thousands of cars a day in there to materially affect the intersection traffic at this time. Is that not correct?
I'm not entirely certain I heard your entire question, Commissioner, but what I would be more concerned about, do I think that the proposed Walgreens adds a tremendous amount of new volume to the intersection? No, sir, I do not. What I would be concerned about, if I were sitting in your chair, is the fact that there are increased turn demands within the functional area of the intersection that are not there presently.
Yeah, we're moving them from one side of the intersection to the other. The other, where they're at right now, has got entrances in the functional area of the intersection. So we're just trading from one side of the intersection to the other for trip generation. Furthermore, we're losing, 77 vehicles a day by taking out 11 houses along there?
Again, if you want to rely on ITE averages, that may well be the case, but I really don't know how those houses that are being taken out would affect the traffic demand within the functional area of that intersection.
Well, I would like to bring the debate down to something everyone could understand, not just us engineers, and that is what percent of traffic does this development add to the intersection? Not what is moved from one side to the other. I want to know how much is added. So if anybody here can answer that, I would appreciate it.
I think when we're talking about how much traffic we're actually adding to the intersection, there's a lot of things in play here. One being what you mentioned with the Walgreens possibly going away on the other side of the street with this development. The other is there's some built-in traffic already on the streets that would use Walgreens as kind of a bypass traffic. The remaining is just your general traffic that draws from the store that might not be on those roads that are today. I think realistically, you're not talking about a huge traffic generator. To say that there's going to be none would be foolish, but percentage-wise, I want to say it was around maybe 1%, 2% in the peak hour.
Well, that's what I was trying to draw out of somebody.
Yeah.
At least an educated guess. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Huffman, as he's joining us from a long ways away here?
So has he seen, Mr. Huffman, have you seen the current plan with the right-of-way approach?
Did you hear that, Mr. Huffman?
I did not.
Have you seen the current plan with the new, right turn approach? Sorry, this is Michelle Stubblefield of the commission. With the right turn approach, with the new approaches into Walgreens. No.
Clarification is the right only
Clarification, yeah,
on
exactly.
Gage Boulevard, the right only exiting.
The right
Gage
only
Boulevard.
exiting on Walgreens.
Correct.
Yes.
I have seen that. Mr. Wood and I discussed that at some length. I'm not sure what those do for you, honestly. Mr. Wood and I are both concerned that that would be a high violation risk and especially a wintertime maintenance concern.
Probably likely have people turning left out of the ingress lane, if I'm guessing. If you look at the one at Sonic, that's right around the corner. Right in, right out, and I think it's out and out at times. Any other questions for Mr. Huffman?
Yeah, I have one. I'm not asking you to grab your crystal ball here or anything like that. But right now, it looks like we're at a level service D for this intersection. Probably one of the most high volume in town. I don't know the numbers on that. How soon do you think this intersection is due for an upgrade? Some type of realignment? Yeah, essentially.
If that's your question, I would recommend that right turn lanes should be installed as soon as they're reasonably feasible to do. There is a fair amount of existing right turn demand, and I don't mean to imply that I think this particular developer should be responsible for that. That's not the case at all. The purpose of a traffic impact study is to identify needed improvements, not to assign financial responsibility. That's not our function. I think that right turn lanes are warranted now. I don't think there's any question about that. Without additional right-of-way, they're not feasible. So that would be costly and time-consuming to do. One thing that could be done relatively inexpensively, and I believe within existing right-of-way, though I have not checked the design on this to be sure, is that the non-traversable medians could be installed for some distance, creating a greatly extended left turn lane and a protected functional area. That could be done relatively inexpensively and relatively quickly, and would do a great deal more to address the safety concerns that I noted than anything else.
Thank you.
But I have not made any geometric recommendations that I feel are 5 years out or more.
Any other questions for Mr. Huffman? Okay, we thank you for taking time out of your schedule in China, and appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Hutton's team? Oh, I was just asking if there were any other questions for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, seeing none at this time, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dan Craig. I am one of the owners of Marketplace Shopping Center. I have the unique ability to give you a very long-term perspective on that shopping center and the neighborhood. I'm probably, other than my brother, the only one in this room that was out there picking up trash more than 40 years ago. My family's been involved with the ownership and management of that shopping center for a very long time. We've seen a number of changes during that 40 years, as you can imagine. Certainly there's been significantly increased traffic, and we've also seen a significant increased competition for tenants. I can tell you that we currently have a vacancy in our shopping center that's been there for 7 years. Ever since Valentino's went out of business, we've really struggled to bring in quality tenants to backfill that space. The good news is, right now, we have a group of very successful tenants that mix together well. Many of these are small businesses that have nearly their life savings invested in their business. If our anchor tenant, Walgreens, is allowed to move across the street to residential land, rezone commercial, it will have a significant negative impact on our shopping center and those tenants. Keep in mind that Walgreens, through their lease, has the right to remain there for at least 28 additional years. They're operating profitably, and we have the ability to build them a new store in the parking lot at our existing corner. Regarding reasons for supporting the project, you've heard some testimony on a decline in values. You've heard from a PhD, and I think in Arizona or Colorado. What you didn't hear were owners of rental property that were at the last neighborhood meeting that voiced a concern that their tenants are already asking for a rent reduction in the neighborhood of $75 a month for having a Walgreens interjected in the middle of their neighborhood. I'd submit that what's going on here in the neighborhood is certainly at least as good an indication as what somebody from out of town thinks about this particular neighborhood. The lines are pretty well drawn. I think you've all figured out by now. Those people inside the proposed Walgreen fence are very much in favor of the project because they're going to be paid more for their house than its value as a single-family residence. Those outside the fence either oppose the project generally or want the project expanded to include their house. Speaking as an owner in the neighborhood, I just asked the question, shouldn't people in the neighborhood be entitled to rely on the most recent city map showing this neighborhood as healthy and also showing it on the long-range plan as single-family residential? Crime's also been discussed quite a bit. Crime has been in this neighborhood for the 40 years that I've been involved. My experience is the crime comes and goes. From a management standpoint, our biggest headache has been graffiti and vandalism. I can tell you we've not had any of those problems now for at least a few years. What happens is a bad element comes in the neighborhood, they create damage, and in time, either the police do their job and apprehend them, or they move away. To look at 1/4, I'd ask for, could I have 4 more minutes?
Please, the commission.
I don't think it'll take that long, but I promise I'll stop in 4 or
4
less.
minutes granted.
Looking at 1/4 of crime statistics for this neighborhood, I think doesn't say as much as what we've experienced over many years. There's been a lot of talk about problems with rental property numbers increasing. The fact of the matter is, the U.S. Census Bureau just released statistics very recently all across the country. The number of single-family homes converting to rental homes has increased 31% from 2006 to 2013. It's not just a function of what's going on at this neighborhood. And I also point out that there is a trend towards people choosing to live in rental housing. Rental housing by itself is not bad. What's bad is rental landlords that don't take care of their properties. In my view, it's the city's responsibility to enforce building codes and make sure that the houses are maintained at appropriate level. Either these homes are compliant with building codes and are fine, or they're not, and the city should be enforcing those codes and bringing them back into compliance. Seems like jumping to tearing them down is a very big leap. You've heard a lot about traffic. I'm just going to say a quick statement. I'm not a traffic engineer. Don't pretend to understand all the intricacies, but I can tell you, when I'm at that center, when I'm at the Marketplace Shopping Center during rush hour, our easternmost access point along 29th Street is blocked much of the time. Were it not for our access point somewhere near 500 feet from the intersection, people couldn't come in and out of our property during rush hour. I think adding that extra drive-in point will compound the existing traffic problems, and I really worry about what this whole thing looks like 5, 10 years down the road, because I believe traffic will continue to increase. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I ask that you reject this proposal. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Craig? Seeing none at this time, thank you.
You.
I'm Donna Williams. I have a rental house at 4021, and since this came up, my tenant has moved out because the atmosphere was getting not good, and that whole corner needs to have something done to it. I've owned this house 10 years, and in the last 4 years, my property values have gone down $7,000 on this house. And I got one of the nicer houses in the neighborhood sitting there. So I think something needs to be done. And the traffic flow to me would flow a lot better if it was on the opposite side, on my side over there, instead of where it's at. Because too many times I go down there and I have traffic jams. So I totally approve this project, approve the rezoning of this project. It needs to be done because everything needs to be cleaned up there. And since I've owned, like I said, I've owned this property 10 years, and the property is going down, down, down. Thank you.
Ms. Williams, if I could have you state your address for us, please.
4021 Southwest 28th Street Terrace. I have one of the bigger and nicer houses in there.
Any questions for Ms. Williams? Okay, thank you.